Hey everyone. So I've got Kate Dalgleish with me here today on to do this video with me for a little peace of mind. And the reason Kate is here is because I invited her and she wanted to come, but I really wanted her to share her with everyone here who's going to watch this video, because I heard Kate speaking at a conference about her daughter and about her journey and her experience of struggling with her daughter, and then how this understanding had really made a difference and proved so incredibly helpful and useful and insightful to her. And I was really touched by the story that I heard, like really moved by it, found it so helpful for me in my own parenting journey. I know that for those of you who've got kids, which is quite a lot of you, this is going to be a really, I hope you get as much from it as I did. So first of all, welcome, Kate. It's lovely to have you here with me. And I was just saying to Kate, actually, before we hit record, like, I know that I heard her sharing her story at the conference, and I can't remember what she said, because I have a memory like a goldfish, but also I'm not really interested ever in listening to try and remember what was said. I'm always listening to see the feeling that I come away from. And so what I'd said to Kate as a kind of a get ready for the call is just that I'd love her to share her, I'd love you, Kate, to share your story about what happened with you in Georgia, if that's okay.
Yeah, I love sharing this story.
Yeah, go for it. And then I'll just ask you questions as we go through.
Okay. So I've actually got 3 kids, and my middle one is now 15. And when she was about probably 11 or 12, she started to get anxious. And it was almost like she sort of looked to me and she sort of went, I don't feel okay. Am I okay? And I see myself back then and I'm like, oh, well, you don't actually look okay. I don't know. Are you okay? And back then I saw life the other way around. So I saw that life happens sort of to you. And so what we did is we tried to look at all the outside, to try and fix what was going on with Georgia. So it was the shouty maths teacher. And, we tried to do something about that. And then, there's friendship issues. So we tried to sort of manage that a bit. And then there was, it was like sort of these octopus tentacles. It just kept moving into every part of life. It was like, oh, now I can't go on a school trip because I'm not quite sure who I'll sit next to on the bus. And then, sports matches. Oh, she went from being, it happened very quickly. She went from being, very sporty, and then she was captain of hockey, and then she couldn't play anymore, because she'd be thinking about it beforehand, and then she'd be crying, and then what if I cry on the pitch? And so I lost my bearings. As a mother, I just lost my bearings. I didn't know what to do. And it was like the people around me also didn't know what to do. So there was just this worry, this constant worry. And I actually got quite a wide berth, actually, because people were like, we don't know what to do about that. So that's just... And it was really hard. And was there
like the school involved and CAM services and all that kind of thing, or was it was more low key than that? Or
so the school was involved. They were trying to point me in the, but again they engaged with the anxiety. They engaged with the worry. There was a lot of sort of just people just didn't really know what to do, and you realize it's quite a lonely journey. So, and then someone said, go and have CBT, and we tried that, and we had like 10 sessions or something CBT, and Georgia did not engage with that at all. And I can see why now, because she sort of knew that there was nothing wrong with her, and yet she didn't feel right, and yet she felt awful. So we had CBT, and then we did some counselling, and none of it made any difference. And it just gradually got worse and worse and worse. And at this point, she's not even going to school. Very quickly it spiraled to, she could not even go to school.
Tell me, Kate, your experience of like what? So as this was happening, were you freaking out? Were you were you up at night worrying about it? Were you trying to fix it? Like, like were you like what?
I was, if I look back now, I was in two places. I was managing it because you had to, but at the same time, I was freaking out inside quite a lot of the time, because if she did go to school, I would get these texts all day long.
Yeah.
Every time my phone would ping, I'd be like, oh God, you know.
Yeah.
I'd have to sort of deal with that, or I'd have to deal with the teacher who'd be, you know, I'd have to be telling the teacher, George is not coming in today. And you felt as a mother, you thought that you were being judged, you know, because you're like, teachers would be like, what do you mean she's not coming in today? I said, well, and they didn't understand. I couldn't physically get her into school.
Yeah.
You know, she's a teenager. You know, she's 12 or 13. Or by this time she was like 13, 14. And it's like, half the time, you know, sometimes in the mornings I couldn't find her. You know, she would just disappear. When it was getting in the car, I'd be like, where's Georgia? I've got 2 other children I've got to get to school. Yeah. Georgia is nowhere to be found. I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? You know, are they going to be late for school? Do I find it? I just didn't know what to do. I was a bit like a rabbit in the spotlights, actually. Yeah. And my sister said, so then someone introduced me. She could see that I was struggling. I did cry a lot, actually. And I think I cried a lot with teachers. I just cried a lot because I was exhausted as well, because Georgia half time would be sleeping, you know, waking me up or wanting to sleep in my bed, or, you know, it affects every part of your life.
But when they've got a phone in their hand as well, it is a 24/7. Like, I know that experience with my kids, where like you used to be able to in the old days drop them off and at least you got 6 hours of peace, but not anymore, because they've got their phones. They can. I have that.
Yeah, they've got their phones and they're ringing you from the loo.
Yes. I'm crying in the toilet again.
I'm crying in the toilet. Can you come and get me? Can you come? And you're talking and they're not listening. They can't hear what you're saying. They're not listening. And you don't really know what you're saying either, because you're like, well, I don't know what to do. Should I come get you? Should I not come and get you? So you're both in the storm. Yeah. Completely in this storm together. And it is full on. And, you know, it's you lose your bearings and you don't know what to do. And you lose your common sense. Everything goes out the window. And then, so then this friend of mine came up to me in the playground. She said, have you come across the principles? And I went, no, I've not come across the principles, but you know what? I will try anything. Just hand it over. What is this? Principles, you know? And so I started listening to, you know, Dick and Beckinger and actually some of your stuff as well, you know, the Skittles in the glass, I like that. And it made sense. And it was like, and I listened with Georgia to Dick and Beckinger, and I saw her just move into this other space where she was calm and she just let go of all the thinking and all the stuff. And I just watched her. She got into this nice moment, a nice space. And then it was like, I know this is where I'm going to find the answer. But at that point, I understood it very intellectually, you know, thought creates your feelings, and so nothing really changed, because then it got to the point where she's sort of failing at life, because I was like, well, this is coming from your thinking. And she'd be like, well, I know it's coming from my thinking. You know, so
for Georgia and every client and any of us that have come on this journey have had that experience.
Yeah, and so
it's just my thinking, that's not helpful.
Yeah, that's not helpful. And so I was like, oh, well, this isn't working, you know, because I was using it like a tool. I was using it, you know, and I understood it, but I was, you know, and so I felt still. So then my sister said, my God, Kate, you're going to have a breakdown. You need to get some proper help here. You need to get you know, she meant like a trained professional in, you know, with children with anxiety. And so what I did is I called Dave and Jen from Freedom Thinking. And I went and they said, look, I cried down the phone and in Tesco, and Dave said, just come at the weekend. And I just went. I just took Georgia out of school. We went to the Lake District, 4 days. I just said to the teachers, I said to Pete, my husband, I said, right, I'm just gonna go for 4 days. I know that this is where I'm gonna find the answers. Just trust me, this is what I'm doing. So we went. That wasn't what my sister had in mind when she said you need to get some proper help. And so I went and I spent 2 days not listening, because I was trying to fix Georgia. And I didn't realize I was not listening. but the whole thing was being filtered through, how is this going to fix Georgia? Is this going to fix Georgia? I was, thinking, da, 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 da. Quite noisy, didn't really hear much.
Looking over at her, has she fixed yet? Is she listening? Is she fixed yet? Is she listening?
Is she listening? Is she holding my hand? Is she, what's she doing? Is she? And then it was interesting because I remember it was that night, Georgia said to me, she said, Mom, I'm in this lovely feeling. I love being in the Lake District. She loves climbing as well. And there was a climbing center there, and we were having a nice time. We were in this little cottage, the two of us. And it was lovely. We were very together and connected. And she said, this is, it's lovely. And she said, you do know, when we get home, I'm not going to go back to school. And I just remember that moment. I was like, oh my God, you're not going to go back. This isn't going to work then. Oh my God, this isn't going to fix you. You're not going to go back to school. And that thought, see now, for example, I wouldn't react that way because I know it's a thought. It means nothing. She just had this thought, and no thought is truth. No thought is real. We just bring it alive. It's like, blowing into a balloon, and we bring it alive and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what I was doing is, she had this thought, and it was like this big bubble in front of her. She said, I'm not going to school. And then I looked at it as well. And both of us are staring at this thought going, oh my God. And when we did that, we got into this, we went from being in this lovely feeling to having this horrible evening where we both engaged with this thought that Georgia wasn't going to go back to school. We went into the past of what it's been like for the last 3 years. We went into the future of, oh my God, it's going to be like this when we go home. We completely lost the moment. We believed that thought was real. And we didn't see that we were bringing it alive. If I had just left it alone, nothing would have happened. But because I did exactly what I was telling her not to do, I started to see my role. And then the following day we arrived and we sat on the sofa, and Georgia, we've completely moved into a different space, and she's in the car and she's locked the doors and she's crying. She won't get out. I go in, sit on the sofa. Dave goes out to see Georgia. I sit on the sofa and I was like, oh my God. I said, you don't know what this is like. I started to engage with the problem, completely engage with the anxiety. I've completely lost sight of Georgia now. And I'm like, you don't understand, this, I can't do this anymore. This is just a nightmare, because she has told me she's not going back to school anymore. And Jen was there and she was just like making the tea. And I'm thinking, why aren't you engaging with this problem? And I mean, I can see now, because she could see the true nature of thought. She could see how this works. She could see that I was just in this bubble and it wasn't real. But while I was focusing on it, then it was real. But she knew that I was going to let it go. But in that moment, she didn't need to engage with the problem. She doesn't, she saw me. She sees Georgia. She's not interested in whatever it is that I'm saying is such a problem, because for her, it's not a problem. And anyway, so I'm like, I said to Jen, so Georgia, she's not going to get out of the car. She's not going to talk to Dave. This is a waste of time. I don't know what to do. And Jen says, and I'm sitting there like this, I'm crying. And so Jen says, she said, Kate, really? She says, just look out the window. And I look out the window, and Georgia, she's got this climbing harness on, and she's up a 30-foot tree. So Dave's a tree surgeon, and she's gone up this tree. And I was like, hang on a minute to turn my phone off, sorry. I was like, something really shifted in me, because I was like, hang on a minute, that's it. It wasn't real, I had imagined it, and I brought it alive, and actually she's back in the moment and she's completely fine. And I stopped trying to fix Georgia, and I just came back to the moment, and I started to listen. And I started to listen from a different place. I started to listen from within me, and I saw everything completely differently. It was really bizarre. And I realized I don't need to fix Georgia. Georgia's completely fine. And I saw, my role. My role is not there to fix Georgia. She doesn't need fixing. And also my role is not to worry about Georgia. And my role is just to to love her, you know. And when we came home, it was bizarre because she didn't see, you know, I had this, in the moment when I was there, I had this I don't know, an insight where it just, everything felt different. And then, but she didn't hear this. And so I spent the next year, maybe 6 months, I don't know, just finding more and more ways to show this to her, sort of more, you know, more simple ways. I started to connect with her, and eventually she started to listen, and everything changed. And so, you know, to cut a long story short, but I can explain some of the things that she listened to. But she's now, you know, she's back at school, she's loving school, she's, you know, the anxiety is gone. If she does sort of have moments of, you know, going into thinking, she sees what's going on. I can point her back. You know, I know that we'll never get to where we were before again, because it was like we were what are those things we did at school? You know, the three-barrow wheelbarrow race. So would get, you know, she would get really anxious, and then I'd pick up her legs and we'd go off together down this rabbit hole. And it's like, I don't do that now. So I don't give any, I just don't give it any oxygen anymore. And it seems to just, you know, it's so different. I mean, this morning we went to school and we were laughing about something that we were watching on the pavement. And, you know, she was crying with laughter because she was completely in the moment. And we were late because there was an accident on the way to school. But before, she would have been in her head, thinking about, you know, we're late and that's going to mean this, and she'd been in the future. She's just, the difference now is that she spends, you know, much more of her time in the moment and much less time in her head.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that Charlie, okay, so my 12-year-old, he now, so he's got, I actually think that it's quite normal for, you know, for children to get to a certain age, you know, 11, 12, there's change going on. And I think it's quite normal. So Charlie now is starting to get anxious.
Right.
And he is starting to really feel it. And so what he's got is, you start to notice what belief that they have, which is, you know, arrows pointing in the wrong direction. So he has this belief that I'm okay if, you know, there's an if, not I'm always going to be okay. And I've got this energy running through me, and I'm, you know, he doesn't see that.
Yeah.
So he looks to me and he thinks, well, I'm okay if I know where my family are. So if I know where mum is, if I know where dad is, if I know where. And right now, you know, Fred, my eldest, is driving, so you never know where he is. And Georgia is going off you know, she gets the bus now and goes into Bristol Climbing Club and does all that. And so her phone's never on. We never know when she's coming back. So we don't know where she is. And then so obviously he's feeling really unstable. And that manifests itself with, you know, and you feel it, you know, he feels it in his gut. And then the more you have this belief pointing in the wrong direction, the more evidence you find that with, you know, that goes with your belief. So now he's, you know, carries on thinking, he's like, well, what if you're in a car crash? So he goes to school. This was quite funny. He went to school last week, and he had an exam, and he had an English exam, and in the exam he starts to, the phone rings in the lesson, whatever, and the teacher doesn't pick up the phone, and the phone's ringing, and he starts to think, and the power of thought is incredible, you know, how we imagine, and it's, you know, it's all connected with this belief he has that, where's mum, you know. And so he has this you know, he starts to imagine that, well, that phone call's to do with mum, she's been in a car crash, why aren't they answering the phone? They need to answer the phone because that's about mum. And so we talked about it, and so I said, what did you do? And he said, well, I just eventually, so he said, eventually the phone stopped. He said, but I'd already sort of worked myself up, and I had a little cry. And I said, And then what did you do? And he said, and then I did what you told me. And I said, what did I tell you? And he said, I just got back into the moment. And I knew it was coming from my thinking. And I went, oh. I said, how do you do that? And he said, well, I just looked out the window and I was looking at the clouds and I saw that they were all different shapes. And I was laughing because now, you know, we don't take it, none of this is so serious. I used to take it so seriously. I used to take life so seriously. And now I was like, yeah, Charlie, I said, another way you could get in the moment would be, you know, to look at the exam paper you've got right in front of you. You know, you don't have to stare out the window of the clouds. You know, that will also get you into the moment that you're in an English exam, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's starting to observe himself. He's starting to see that that he is not, he's not his thinking. You know, he's 12 years old. And I think, well, in a way, I quite like the fact he's having a bit of a struggle, because it's out of struggle that you start to see this. Like, I would never change the journey that Georgia and I went on, because I don't think I would have seen this. And now I can't not see it. It's like I feel like I've become an observer of life. I just observe it in everything, every day. And there's no exception. There's no exception to when life sort of flips around and you see that everything comes from within. You see how you create your experience from moment to moment to moment, and you're in control. And you see, and you've got this gift of your feelings, which show you, you know, they show you when you're going off. And I think the biggest thing for me as a parent, and this is when I talk to other parents and I share this with them, they seem quite surprised when I talk about worry. So, and I was thinking this morning as I was walking the dog, I was thinking about because I remember you talked about a ski trip that you went on.
Yeah.
And I think ski. And you can, you have your own metaphors, and it doesn't have to be skiing, it could be anything. But for me, skiing is quite a good one to show how this works, because I have quite a lot of thinking around skiing and a bit of fear and a bit of, I'm starting to see that now. But I was imagining, my husband's a very good skier. And it was quite a good sort of, metaphor around, if you imagine that your child so imagine you're skiing with your child and they get halfway down the slope, and they start to say, oh my gosh, I feel a bit unstable. I feel a bit worried that I'm going to fall off the edge. And I feel like we might be lost. Now, what I would do in the skiing situation is that I would get, and what I did with Georgia, is I'd get quite caught up in that myself. I'd be like, really?
Yeah.
You might fall off the edge? Do you think we might fall off the edge? What should we do to stop us falling off the edge? Do you think we might be lost?
You can almost feel that your fear arising like in response to theirs, like
it's like
fear to meet theirs where they're at.
Yeah. It's like your own instability, it's your own. And I think as well, you start to see your own belief. Like, I think I used to have this belief that I'm okay if my children are okay. I'm okay if my children are happy. And I started to see what that meant. It meant that every time they were anxious or they weren't happy, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm okay. I didn't see that I was doing that at the time, but now I look back and I think, oh, so that was about me not feeling okay. Because, when they're anxious, it's like, whoa, I don't feel okay now. Yeah. And so you try and do something with it, and innocently what you're doing is you're pointing them in the wrong direction. Because, in one respect, you're saying you're resilient, and yet you're worrying. So It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to a child either. And so if you compare that with Pete, who's a good skier, if one of the children, says, oh, I'm a bit worried, or I'm a bit going to fall off the edge, Pete would say, look, you're not going to fall off the edge. You're overthinking it. You're up in your head, and you're just, come back into the moment and enjoy yourself. You're not going to fall off the edge because there's these pieces, you're on the piece, and there's these peace markers, whatever they're called. And also, you know, he would just completely, you know, we've got a map that's showing us the way, and you're completely fine. And you can see that the effect that has on your child is that, you know, and when we do go skiing, they gravitate to Pete because they know that, you know, he knows.
And it's not in the logic and the rationale and the explanation. It's in the feeling of his certainty, his knowing that they're okay. Like, you could say the same words, but you don't really know it. Yeah. And but he can say it and they feel it.
Yeah. And it's, you know, what I always say to parents, you know, when I'm sharing this and when I'm with them, and what I really sort of say is, you know, I'm very happy to talk to parents and their children, and, you know, sometimes we talk together, but really it's the parents that I really want to talk to.
Yeah.
Because it is, you know, for me, so Georgia, so she would go in and out of she gets, you know, she's not going to school, and then we have lockdown, so hooray, we're at home. And then, you know, it's all fine. Then we have to go back to school again. And then we are back in lockdown. And then we're back at school. And so the second lockdown, she has 3 days when she completely freaks out because she's the thought of going, and she's starting new school, the thought of starting a new school after lockdown, can't do it. She's quite tired. She's in quite low mood anyway. And she starts to really look at that thought. Now, she spent 3 days looking at that thought very carefully, very deeply. She's in this bubble. And what I did was before I would have, that probably would have, you know, freaked me out, because she sort of looked like she was depressed. You know, she wasn't really eating properly. She wouldn't come down for meals. When she did come down for meals, she couldn't really last the whole meal, because she'd get into her thinking, she'd sort of cry and slip away, and then she'd feel awful. And so this went on for about 3 days. And I wasn't detached from her. People get confused with not worrying and being detached. It's not about that. You know, when Pete's on the slope with the kids, he's not detached from them in any way. He knows what they're capable of. He knows that they're fine, you know, and it's on the third day, she was in my bed, and I said to her, Georgia, I said, you know, I know that you're in a storm right now, but the amazing thing is that I'm not feeling it. And that can sound really selfish, but it isn't. It's like, I'm here for you because I'm not in your storm. And I said, I'm not feeling it. I know it's going to pass. I know you're fine. It's like, I properly know that you're fine, that you know, you're made for this life. I said, I know you can't see it right now, but I think it's enough that I can see it, because you're, you know. And she starts to listen to me, and it's like I said, you know, you're on the surface, and, you know, where all the waves are, and you're connecting with all the waves, and, you know, and I know what that's like, and I'd never say it's just your thinking, because it's so powerful, and you feel it, and I know that's where you are. And I said, but I'm underneath, where, you know, where you don't feel the waves so much. I'm down below, and it's calmer here. You know, I'm not in the future thinking how it's going to be next week. I'm not in the past of how it has been for the last 3 years. I'm just here in the moment. And it was like she came down with me. She just sort of, she's let it all go. Just, you know, she would go up again into the storm and into her thinking, and then she'd come back down. And then she'd start to see there was a difference. And that deep connection that you can have with your child, it does not come from worry. It comes from a deep knowing. And that deep knowing comes from looking more and more in this direction, and just allowing and seeing, just sort of seeing, it's becoming more and more conscious. You know, you become more and more aware, and you start letting go of all belief and all labels and all you know, I have no belief around Georgia anymore. I have, you know, I used to think she was highly sensitive and she can't do that because, you know, I used to talk for her pretty much. I mean, when I went to see Dave and Jen, Dave was like, you talk for Georgia, you know, just, he could see what I couldn't see. And now I know she's capable of anything, as am I. You know, all the beliefs that I had about myself, being, you know, it's just my whole life, like nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed. It's just gone deeper.
So I wanted to ask you then, so what I hear in your story is that you were able to have, like, Georgia was interested in there being conversations around the principles being held in her presence, right? So you guys could talk about it. She would go and see Jenny. You know, she came up to the retreat with you. When you talk to your son, you have conversations that are helping them have a deeper understanding. You have conversations about this in your family, right? Yeah. My family don't come near me with that hooby-dooby stuff, they say, right? Yeah. So what I've had to learn and experience is as my understanding deepens, without even talking to them about the principles, about being under the wave, and you're on top of the wave and I'm underneath the wave, you can still, if you're listening to this and your kids are like mine and they're like, don't come near me with your hooby-dooby stuff, then it's not helpful. I know it's thinking, that's not helpful, Mum. If that's all you've got to offer, go away, right? So that's kind of like, I'm not listening to any more of your hooby-dooby stuff. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight the alternative route, which is just as your knowing deepens, there's something like your husband doesn't, like, to use your husband, right? Your husband doesn't have to explain to them all about the this and that and the other of skiing. He can, but he doesn't have to, because it's a certainty of feeling that is what, like, it's his knowing. It's that invisible you knowing the space you're living in, the place you're coming from, and then when you are around your kids, you're knowing, you're understanding. Like you, I love working with parents much more than kids, because I think it's your knowing, your understanding, and then the feeling you walk around in your house has an impact on the way that your kids show up for you in your life. And that what you shared something about, you know, that when we look to see, we tell our kids that nothing in the world outside of you can make you feel anything, and then we walk around worried because our kids are worried. Like, it's so out of integrity, but we're totally innocent. Where we're saying nothing outside you can make you feel anything. And then as soon as they start getting anxious, we get anxious, like they're causing it. And then you're right, we're trying to calm them down innocently, not realizing that what we're doing that so that we can be okay. And the minute we see it, that was so freeing for me. The minute I suddenly saw that my okayness is independent of whatever my kids are up to in any moment, whatever they're up to, no matter how serious or scary or whatever that might look like, my okayness is not dependent on that. And that took all the pressure off them having to show up in a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, they're free to be anxious, freaky, scared, whatever. My kids weren't in my little world. They kind of weren't. I needed to fix them, because you don't have to be anxious all the time. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to be fearful. And like I was doing kind of what you said, totally without realizing, which was trying to help them so that I could settle back down. I was uncomfortable, and I thought it was coming from them. And whenever human beings are uncomfortable, they try and do something to get out of that feeling. They try and, you know, we all have an inbuilt knowing that settle down is possible. And so we try and find that in any way, shape we can. And if it looks like it's being created from something outside of you, like your kids think it's being created by their friends or COVID or lockdown or school or whatever, for as long as you're living with that reality, which is that they are making you feel upset, angry, upset, whatever, worried, then it's really hard to be of any help. Because you're both caught in, like you said, you're both caught in that misunderstanding. And that was so fundamental for me to, I mean, that was a real game changer for me to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you start, I think you start, for me, like being an observer, you start to see is how you just, I, the other night, Georgia, she was really tired and she mouthed across the table. She went, and in that moment, I went into the past.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I went into the future and I'm having a conversation with her tutor, and I'm thinking,
yeah.
And I felt it from the top of my body down to my toes.
Yeah.
It is so powerful and it is so incredible. But all that happens is like, before, it's such a journey, because before I would judge myself, why know if I get this, I know the principles, then why am I feeling this? I'm feeling this because I'm in the past and I'm in the future. It's like there isn't a right and wrong. This is how it works. And then you start to observe it. And so what I sort of do with my kids is I just like point little things out like that. I'll say to Georgia, oh, this is what I just did. And then I come back, because then I'll come back to the moment and I'll leave it alone. Unlike, before, when I would have done something, when Georgia said that, I would have, that means this. Whereas now I'm just like, she just said that in the moment, let's just see what happens. And she did go to school and she was fine. Yeah. So, you start to see how you just create. And you also start to I don't really talk to them about the principles or anything. I used to be more, I realize now I was almost more sort of foie gras, trying to force feed them, because again, I needed them to hear that. Yeah. So I could be okay. Now I don't. And now I know that, so, and the difference is that they sort of, with Charlie and Georgia, they sort of come to me for a bit of knowing, and they, it's like having a little, what I call it is, going to the petrol station. I think Dick and Bettinger talked about that. And it's like they come for a bit of knowing and then they go off again. But I'm just going to point out what they're doing, and I don't sort of go, well, this is, It's just very lighthearted and, just accept that's what you're doing right now. You don't always. So Georgia had this belief, which was, I started to see all the beliefs that she had because we started to notice them. And she had this belief that I'm okay if I feel ready. I'm okay if I feel good. I'm okay if my friendships are very solid. All the things on the outside of her. So she'd wake up in the morning and she'd, okay, do I feel ready?
Check them all, yeah.
Do I feel good? And the chances are, no, you don't feel good. I mean, imagine waking up in the morning, do I feel good? I'm going back to sleep then. You're tired or whatever it is. You don't always feel good. It might be the odd time that they all line up and, okay, today I can go to school. But that's not a way to live your life. You very rarely get all those lined up. So she started to realize that there wasn't truth in these beliefs, because I feel safe if I'm at home. And then when she was at home, she'd feel crap because she'd feel a bit of a failure and she didn't want to be at home, and she was in this up in her head. So she's like, because I said to her, I said, well, because we were this was a real turning moment for us when her school has this, because of COVID and stuff, you drive and you drop off and you drive around. And we spent, on that day after lockdown, when we were first going back in, we spent, I think, 2.5 hours going around. And I could see when I was getting caught up, because I'd go into the future and go, oh, I'd go into time. This is a waste of time. We're going to end up at home anyway. I could catch myself. Okay, You're doing what you're asking her not to do. You're in your thinking the same way as she is. So just be back in the moment again. I could see when I was caught at myself, I was no good, because it would come out as sort of, I would get impatient and I would get, come on, let's just go home. And so then I had to keep grounding myself and keep, notice when I'm not in the moment, and I'd come back to the moment, and then I'd sort of know what to say. And, you know, and I was asking her, so this belief you have that you feel safe at home, I said, what happens if we go home now? How are you going to feel? And she went, not good. I said, so how true is it? You know, this belief that you're following, that, you know, your thinking is, your arrow is pointed, I'm okay if. I said, is that true? You know, you look at it yourself, you see. And she started to see for herself. And then, so we'd drive around. She'd say, okay, I'm going to go in. She'd drive around. And it's a bit like jumping off a diving board, where you go to the edge and you go, I'm going to jump. You go to the edge and you look down and you're like, well, will I be okay? Or what's it going to feel? I'm going to get that lurchy feeling that I don't like. And actually, I'm not going to jump. And you walk back, you know, it's like, and I said to her, you are not going to get out of this car while you're in your head. You've got these beliefs that you've explained what they are. We know what they are. And the belief is, you know, I have to be ready. I have to know. I said, you can't know. We're now like 2 hours late. We don't know where everyone's going to be. You don't know what mood your friends are going to be in. We don't know, you know, there isn't certainty. So you either carry on thinking and looking for certainty and trying to make it, and it's like going down this path that you know where it takes you, or you don't engage with it and you just jump. And she wasn't willing to just jump for those 2 hours, go around again. And then I think she just thought, oh, sorry. She just jumped. She just got out of the car, despite, you know, she was shaking. You could see the anxiety was there, but she was like overruling it. You know, she just did it. She just stopped engaging for that moment, and she went in, and and I think that's all it took. You know, it took a while for her to realize that she didn't, you know, have to engage with every thought. She started to see it, and it took me being incredibly in the moment to just see, and I had to trust that it was going to come. There's something, I was going to say something, or something was going to come to me. And she just got out of the car and went in, and then she was thrilled. You know, she was absolutely thrilled. But as a parent, there is a lot of that, which is yourself staying in the moment, yourself not going into time of.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask you about, right? So like, that's what I hear when I've listened to you for this whole session that we've been talking about is, so when you shared your first story about, you know, you and Georgia going out to see Dave and Jen, and then you tell a story, and then you very quickly went, and then a miracle happened, and then now Georgia's fine, right? For people listening, that's what it was like. Hang on a minute, tell me what happened in the room. What did you see? Like, what? When I'm listening to you, what I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you saw something very powerful. You had an insight into the nature of being in the moment and not going into time. So, because I can hear that through your whole, like, I can hear you say that over and over again. Like it sounds to me like, in a nutshell, that insight was a turning point for you in particular. And I know we all get our own insights, and we all get exactly what it is that we need. And this was yours for you. But if you were going to talk about that, kind of how that's true for all of us, so that helpful for people who are listening here, like, what did you see about being in the moment versus being in time for those parents who are listening here that would love to know more about that insight?
The trouble is with insights is when you put them into words, they sort of get lost in translation, and it's like because the weirdest thing happened to me. I sat in this cafe, and not, you know, this is just what happened to me. You don't need to have this insight. Other people have, you know, just moments when they wake up very gradually but I think I was so stuck in my ego. I was so, you know, what happened to me was, I have always lived my life very much very rationally. You know, I wasn't interested in anything sort of beyond the rational, and And I would put things in boxes, so that is for religious people, that's for those, spiritual people, that's for the yogis. And I'm very, this is me, I just do it this way. And yet when I was, sort of up a mountain in Wales, or I was sitting in a beautiful cathedral, or I was listening to bagpipes or something, I would feel this sort of presence. And I would feel it, and it would feel amazing. And that was when I was just in the moment, but I didn't know that. So I would feel it, and then I would rationalize it away. Like, that's for religious people. If I'm in a cathedral, that's for, religious people, or that's for, I would sort of question it. I would go, what is that? What is that feeling I have? There's this, and people say, what are you? Are you Church of England? Are you this? And they ask you to put yourself into a box, and you go, well, I feel there's something, but I don't know what it is. And so you just, leave that. And when I was with Dave and Jen, and 2 days I wasn't listening, and the third day I started listening. And it just came to me. I was like, oh my God, that presence that I have always sort of recognized, but never paid much attention to, is within me. It's like, it's there all the time. And I sat there, and I was in this cafe. It was funny because it was Valentine's Day, and I was sitting on my own. And I did laugh at how it would look to people around me, because I just started to cry into my latte on my own. And because I just felt this huge relief. I was like, oh my God, I've got this, and you can call it whatever you like, this presence, this energy, God, wisdom, it's in me. And when I'm in the moment, I feel it. Right. And what happened was, my sister was like, what is this knowing that you talk about? And I'm like, I can't put it into words, because when I put it into words, it's like smoke. It just sort of, it's a knowing that's beyond. It's like a feeling. And it's when you just look in this direction, and you just, allow the possibility that there is unknown, and you just, then you see that, all my life I've kept my foot against the door, like, because I've not been willing to look in that direction. I've had everything very rational, and then I sort of opened it just a tiny bit. Maybe, there's a possibility. And it was just like, whoa, it came flooding in. And now, and I know that, that can sound a bit bonkers maybe when I put it into words, but it's like, I just know when I'm in my thinking, because I feel it. I can feel really unstable, and I still do it. We all do it. I felt it, just when I was thinking about Georgia. I'm sure I've felt it a lot today when I'm thinking about doing this video. I get to my thinking and think, oh, I can talk about, what if I go blank? When I get in the moment, I know I'm fine. It's like a different space, and you start to go to that space. It's like you don't go there because it's all we are. And then I see now other people, when I talk to my brother-in-law, and this was amazing, because he's lived, in his ego, and he's saw life happening to you, and he's quite a searcher. And, my stress is coming from my work and my relationship with your sister. And there was so much going on, and he's, he didn't listen to me for a while, because I'm his wife's sister. And then he started to listen just completely neutrally. He just started to listen. This is the thing, listen without all the thought. And we had this talk probably like a month ago, where they're in America and I was here, and we were talking, and he just went, oh my God. He said, it feels like, he said, and he'd gone from a complete place of stress. And he said, I feel like there's this mill pond. He said, everything just feels, and he was like, you feeling this? And it was like everything just, he said, this is all that exists. This is my true being. This is all the other stuff I create. I'm constantly creating. But he said, this is my true being. And we take ourselves away from it, you know, but once you know it's there, then you tend to just, when you're not in time, when you're not in your thinking, when you're not creating, it's just all that's left. It's just what's there. And that is the space where you know, people say to me, you know, you get caught up in your stress, you get caught up in worry, and you don't know what to do. And parents say this all the time, I don't know what to do. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about Georgia. And I don't believe there's any parent who doesn't know what to do with their child. Once they're in that moment, once they get into that space, when they're connected with their true self, when you connect with being, with, you know, with that wisdom that runs through us, you something comes to you and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Why didn't I think about that before? And it's like Pete wrote a letter the other day. He was writing a letter to, and you see signs of this, but we try and rationalize it and then we lose it, you know, and that's what happens. And, you know, so Pete, and you don't notice, whereas now I'm looking, so I notice. And Pete, he was writing a letter to a friend of his whose husband had actually has died. And he said, you know, it's funny because I was writing this letter to her, and he said, when I thought about it, I just didn't know what to write. I just didn't know I couldn't find the words. And he said, and when I stopped thinking, it just came through me and I just knew what to write. And you start to see it's coming from a different space. It's coming from, you know, mind. But so all I do with Pete is, you know, I don't teach the principles. I don't, you know, I just point it out. I go, so what was that? Where's it coming from? If it's not coming from your thinking, where's it coming from? I just like tiny little seeds, I said, that's all I'm talking about. You know, that there is more to life than I've ever known. But I've never been looking for that. And I was not looking for that when I went to fix Georgia. Yeah. But I know it's there.
So if I know you do work with parents, like you said, you have conversations with parents and kids and you help them, point them in this direction, but if people wanted to speak to you more or find out more about your story or work with you, how would they reach out to you? Have you got an email address or?
Yes, I've got an email address, is what most people, actually it's usually word of mouth that I talk to people, but my email is katemoving. I was moving house at the time, it's stuck, katemoving@hotmail.com.
That's so funny, Kate Moving, because you were at that point in time.
Yeah, that seemed, you know, I think I had removal lawyers at the time that was doing, oh, Kate Moving, and now it's like ridiculous because it sounds like I'm dancing or.
So you'll change that soon. You'll just have Kate Still, or something like that.
Yeah, Kate Quiet.
Kate in the moment @hotmail.com. There you go.
Yeah.
No, it's none of those. That will really confuse everyone. No, Kate Moving @hotmail.com if you want to get in touch with Kate. Kate, thank you so much for sharing your story and what's happened in your family. And I can tell an ongoing journey, as it always is when you've got teenagers, and forever probably. That's our next stage, isn't it? No, this doesn't, they are your children forever. So I'm hoping that's helpful to people, whatever the age of their kids and whatever their kids are up to. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.